We continue our countdown to the 2023-24 NHL season, and we continue our look at the Pacific Division with a look at the Anaheim Ducks next on Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years. And of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for the past 30 years. Coming up on today's show, we're going to continue our previews of our rival teams in the Pacific Division with a look at the Anaheim Ducks. We'll get that rivals host thoughts on our team and the Pacific Division as well. And to help us do all that, we welcome in the host of Locked On Ducks. He is JD Hernandez, and you can follow him on Twitter at the site formerly known as Twitter or X or whatever it's being called. He's at StimpyJD, and you can follow Locked On Ducks at LO_Ducks. Hey, Jason, how are you doing?
I'm back finally. I'm finally back and healthy. Thank goodness.
Good. That's
as in the words of Taylor Swift, it's been a cruel summer.
Well, glad things are looking up for you. And
by the way, where's that Swiftie banner at Staples Center?
I think they took it down, I believe.
Yeah.
But
and I'll give you props. I have one Kings thing in front of me. I have a Kings puck gamer.
All right.
So,
well, there you go. I
gotta
know
give you a little cred.
Yeah, you have a few different hockey, things that you're involved in with different teams. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But obviously, you're here because you are the host of Locked On Ducks on the Locked On Podcast Network. And let's get right to it. It wasn't a great season for the Ducks last year. Fewest points in the NHL with 58. So obviously, nowhere to go but up, theoretically. GM Pat Verbeek is continuing to put his stamp on this team, now going into his second season on the job, and he got to make his first coaching hire. Out is Dallas Eakins, in is Greg Cronin. Now, he's never been an NHL head coach before, so enlighten us on what you know about Greg Cronin, and what did you think about his hire as head coach of the Ducks?
I thought Pat Verbeek would get a new coach sooner, but I understand why he chose not to get rid of Dallas Eakins the year before. That 1-year extension, yes, I get that the Ducks were, I hate to say it, but they were kind of purposefully tanking a little bit. If,
It's something we are seeing in sports quite a bit these days. Yeah.
It's something that I never want to say directly, but they were indirectly tanking throughout the season. As far as Greg Cronin's concerned, I think he's going to be a coach that's going to rely a little bit more on defense, which is something the Ducks were sorely missing last year. The Ducks obviously were last in defense last year. They set a record, by the way, for allowing the most shots ever in a season. So at least we're going to have a little bit more of a stance on defense. I think John Gibson will like that because he won't get as much work, and will instill a bit of a different kind of work ethic on this team, which is something that I also think was missing. I hate to say it, but it seemed like the Ducks kind of gave up towards the end of last season. They knew they were out of it. That whole locker room just looked dejected. And it is sad to see how far down the team got with Dallas Eakins there. And, there were some reports saying that, Dallas Eakins lost the room. Players just were, they weren't trying as hard. So to instill a different culture in the locker room is going to be a big start. To improve on defense, that's going to be a big start. And to have a little bit of a hard-nosed style of play, I think will help the Ducks, which explains a couple of their signings that they made this offseason.
And we can certainly touch on that if you want in a minute. But you mentioned John Gibson, so I have to bring that up. There was a report in July that he had demanded a trade and that he was quoted as saying he was never going to play another game for the Anaheim Ducks. His agent then claimed that report was false. He's under contract for 4 more years, 6.4 million per season. So what's the truth? What's the reality here? Has he demanded a trade? Has he played his last game for the Ducks? Is he going to be part of the Ducks when the season gets started?
There was another report that came out not long after that that said, no, he's going to stay after all. He still has his no trade clause and he's not going to exercise it. So he is going to stick around at least for the beginning of this season. I feel like it's going to give the new coach a chance. And as you said before, the Ducks have nowhere to go but up. So while those reports came out earlier in the summer, now we've been hearing that they might renege on that, and Gibby's going to stick around at least for right now. That besides, the Ducks did make an interesting signing with Alex Stalock, veteran goaltender, which goes into something else that I was going to bring up at some point. What does it mean for the goaltending? Dostal is going to stay in San Diego, which means Gibby's going to stay up in Anaheim, at least for this season. And that indicates to me that maybe Dostal's not quite ready, so the Ducks are not ready to give up on Gibson just yet. Plus, he's still a decent goaltender. I mean, he's right around league average as far as expected goals, at least expected goals allowed. But then when you consider how many expected goals against the Ducks were supposed to have this season, which was a lot, you can see that Gibby went through a lot of hard work. And something that I brought up on my podcast a while back, that Gibby was one of the better rated goalies as far as high danger chances. He was, better than average in that regard. So I don't think we're ready to give up on Gibson just yet, but time is running very short and they need to get going now.
Couple of interesting signings in the offseason. Brought in a couple of veteran guys who have some big game experience. Alex Killorn comes in from Tampa, forward who's won some Stanley Cups. And then you bring in veteran defenseman Radko Gudas, who just went on a Cinderella run with the Florida Panthers. A couple of interesting veteran guys to bring in to, help mentor the younger players going forward.
Help mentor and also bring a little bit of grit. Killorn isn't exactly a player that's going to step aside. He's going to get in your face. And especially Gudas. Gudas likes to get in your face. I know you've seen that in person. One where Gudas, likes to elbow around a little bit, likes to push guys around. And that's something the Ducks had been missing since they traded Nick Delorier a couple seasons back. They didn't have anybody to really back up their players. So I don't hate the signings, but I think Alex Killorn's contract a little bigger than I would have liked, and I think a lot of people agreed with that. Is it an overpay? Maybe, but the Ducks needed to spend the money to barely get over the threshold of the cap floor, which they barely did.
Well, obviously the Ducks are going to ultimately succeed or fail based on the young talent that they're acquiring. And you've got a couple of guys who are still unsigned at this point, and that is forward Trevor Zegras and defenseman Jamie Drysdale. Ducks have plenty of cap space. They're restricted free agents. What's the holdup on getting these two guys signed?
Nobody knows what the holdup is. Nobody knows. That's the crazy thing, is we're already entering September and they're still not signed. Training camp is only a few weeks away, and neither of those guys have been signed. And maybe we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the money going to be like for Trevor Zegras? What kind of contract are they going to offer him? That's going to be the big question. Could Zegras get possibly could he get $7 million per season? Could he get $8 million per season? It feels like the sky's the limit for Zegras, and the Ducks have all the money to spend. So why not just go for it and sign him to that massive contract right now? Just get it over with and do it. As far as Drysdale, because he only played 6 games last season, that value might go down a little bit. And I think there's still the assessment of what exactly Jamie Drysdale should get. That's a massive question mark.
And speaking of signing a big contract, Troy Terry this offseason did get a 7-year, $49 million deal from the team. So they did pay him. Do you like that investment in him? And is he one of the building blocks of this franchise going forward?
Absolutely. I'm of the mindset that I think Troy Terry should be the next captain of the Anaheim Ducks. He's been showing great leadership. He's shown that he belongs in this league. He could put up 30 goals per season every year, at least for the next 4 or 5 years. I could see him easily getting 30, 35, maybe even 40 goals. And that's something the Ducks want, possibly in their next captain. And I know it's been a little bit of a weird spot since Getzlaf retired last season, obviously no captain. I think he's the guy. And I think he's the guy that you want to build around because Zegras is still very young. McTavish is still very young. You have all these young guys that are coming up. But if you have a guy like Troy Terry who's been around for a few seasons, gains more experience, and gains more trust in the locker room, then I think that's the best possible deal you can make.
All right, one more question about your Ducks, and it's I guess a big question because of the future. I know you missed out on Connor Bedard, and as a Kings fan, I'm very sad about that. But you did get
No, you're not.
Swedish. No, I'm not. You did get Swedish center Leo Carlsson. Some thought it would be Adam Fantilli, who ended up going third overall to Columbus, but it was Leo Carlsson. What did you think about that decision to go with him at number 2, and thoughts on when we might see him in the NHL?
I didn't hate it, and here's why. Because Leo Carlsson is a type of player that the Ducks would want. For many years, the Ducks were infamous for drafting Swede after Swede after Swede, some of whom are no longer on the team, unfortunately, but that was kind of their thing, and now they're going back to that by getting the super Swede Leo Carlsson. And the thing I liked about his game was last season, he was playing against grown men, you know, guys that are way older than him, much stronger than him. But Carlson is one of the best skaters in this draft. And I think that's something that you want in a league that is getting faster and faster paced. We've seen with how the Kings have made their signings this past couple off seasons, the Ducks are relying more on speed. So yeah, I like it. Big body. Some people are saying always reminiscent of, so and so. Some are saying reminiscent of Ryan Getzlaf just because of the body size. I don't know if I buy that, but it's still a quality player in this draft that would go number 2 or even number 1 on some other years. And you can't go wrong with someone like that who's going to put up multiple goals per night, possibly, or multiple points per night, rather, and could possibly ceiling. I could see him being a first liner down the line.
I mean, there's no rush on him, obviously, but what do you think the timetable is as far as him being in the NHL?
This season. I
Okay.
could see him getting on the Ducks this season because the Ducks haven't made a whole lot of other moves. So I think we see him in Anaheim at some point this season.
All right. Up next, we're going to find out what Jason thinks about our LA Kings. We'll do that next here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, I want to let you know, though, that football season is back and ready to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long because right now, when you bet on the Super Bowl, you pick a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time that team wins a regular season game. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use it for, bets on the point spread or over-unders or anything you want to do. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on. Start by earning, I should say, your bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. Again, that is FanDuel.com/locked on. All right, we are back with Jason Hernandez, and he is the host of Locked On Ducks, and we're going to get his thoughts on the LA Kings. Now, the Kings made a big trade this offseason. They shipped out 3 players off their NHL roster and a second-round pick to get Pierre-Luc Dubois from the Winnipeg Jets. As a Ducks fan, what are your thoughts on this trade? Do you see this deal making the Kings better this season?
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Look, the Kings did a great service to themselves by shedding the albatross contract of Cal Peterson. To say the least, that contract might be one of the worst in recent memory. And for the Kings to get rid of that contract and to bring in someone of Pierre-Luc Dubois' caliber, I think is nothing but good, don't you think?
Well, definitely getting rid of the contract. I know it was, we were talking recently with Sharks host JD Young about the difference between goaltenders one year to the next. And the Kings situation going into last season, they had Quick and they had Peterson. They were paying over $10 million for that tandem. Now they're paying just over $2 million for Cam Talbot and Phoenix Copley. And arguably they're a better tandem than Peterson and Quick were last season. So it is amazing how things can change, especially with the goaltending position from year to year. So,
the one thing I did not like about the trade, as far as the Kings are concerned, part of me thinks they gave up a lot to get Pierre-Luc Dubois. Giving up Gabriel Velarde, can I tell you something, Eddie?
Tell me.
I've said this on the Locked On Kings podcast for maybe 3 or 4 years ago with a different host. And I told her at the time that I thought that Velarde was a little overrated. And that drew some ire, and it still does. Do I think he's improved? Yes. But getting Gabriel Velarde out, not as big a minus as you would think. Giving up Iafallo and Kupari, that does suck for the Kings. It takes away a little bit of their depth.
For sure.
As far as fourth line, and especially in Ontario. Ontario, good luck, Rain fans. Good luck. Giving up Sean Walker and Helga Grans in the long run, the depth has gotten a little bit worse. But the Kings boast one of the best first and second lines in the league. So I would say top 6, they're much better. And I think they could be a force to be reckoned with this season.
Just anything overall as far as the Kings that kind of jumps out at you other than that trade? It could be something positive, something negative, just anything as far as where the team is right now.
I think they're in a good spot. I really do. I think Edmonton might start going down a little bit. I think they regressed a little bit last season. I had Edmonton going to the Stanley Cup final, and they did not. So Edmonton is beatable. Vegas is going to be tough because they just won the cup, obviously. They still have a lot of pieces coming back. That's the only team that I think is going to give the Kings trouble. But I could see LA easily getting to that number 2 slot in the division. Easily, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the question was, do you think the Kings are a playoff team? So the answer to that is yes. So 2 straight years they've been in the playoffs, but 2 straight years out in the first round against Edmonton. Is this the year that the Kings finally get out of the first round?
Yes, absolutely. They've improved way too much on those top 2 lines. There's no reason to see them possibly make it to the second round. Maybe even the Western Conference Finals. Maybe. But I could see them getting out of the Schneid and beating up on... It could be Edmonton. It could be Seattle. It could be one of those 2 teams that they could beat in the first round. But I see them finally breaking through, and I think that Dubois could make a big difference in this postseason.
Well, the Kings have obviously gone through a recent rebuild, which the Ducks are going through now. Is there anything that you see that the Kings have done that you think maybe the Ducks could replicate or use as some sort of a roadmap as far as what they can do to get back to being a playoff team in the near future?
It's interesting you mentioned that because I looked at the Kings prospects from 3-4 years ago, and I had the Kings as one of the best prospect pools in the entire National Hockey League. You look at the success of the Ontario Reign from 2016, 2017. The way that Kempe came up was just brilliant at the behest of Ducks fans. But, Kempe, putting up hat tricks against John Gibson because he loves to do that. Look at how he came up. Look at Quentin Byfield, another great prospect. You have a slew of young guys. But now the Kings have traded a lot of them away to get some top-tier talent. Look at the job that Philippe Deneau has. I love Philippe Deneau, by the way. One of my favorite players in the entire league. Yes, he's an LA King, but I just love watching him play hockey. And I think Kings fans are going to feel the same about Pierre-Luc Dubois as well. So I think the path the Kings have taken is get all this top-tier prospect talent, trade it for really good talent. Could the Ducks possibly do that in the future? Maybe that's a roadmap that they could think about is eventually trading some of these prospects for some really good players that could end up being a middle six player, someone that could contribute down the line.
All right, we've got some more with Locked On Ducks host Jason Hernandez. We'll get his thoughts on the Pacific Division as a whole. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, I want to invite you to check out Locked On NHL. It's your daily show to keep you updated on everything going around on the National Hockey League. Again, Locked On NHL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So we're wrapping it up with Jason Hernandez, host of Locked On Ducks. And I want to get your thoughts on the Pacific Division. Yes? Something to add, Jason?
Do you have a Funko of yourself?
I do. I do.
That's amazing.
It is pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty. I got them made for me and all of my coworkers on a show that I do on the Fox Sports Radio Network. It was like a Christmas gift. We all got Funkos of ourselves.
Oh, yeah,
so.
you hosted the other day, by the way. So
I did actually. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
As for the well, I didn't let you on hold. No, I'm just kidding. As for the Pacific Division, actually, real quick, I did want to. You got a kind of an interesting perspective on another team in the Pacific Division, not the Ducks, not the Kings, but the Seattle Kraken, because you are the public address announcer for the Kraken's AHL affiliate, the Coachella Valley Firebirds, who made it to the AHL finals this past season, their first season. Kind of did a Vegas Golden Knights at the AHL level. Unfortunately, they didn't win it. Same thing with the Knights their first year. But what's that experience been like for you?
To lose in Game 7 in overtime, that was pretty heartbreaking. And for me to actually sit there and watch them celebrate for half an hour. But it was a magical first season. And you could see what Seattle is doing. They're focusing on just winning at all levels. And you know what? Ron Francis kind of knows what he's doing a little bit. That's someone the Kings need to watch out for, as I mentioned previously. I could see Seattle making it in the first round, but I think the Kings could beat them. But Seattle's got a slew of good talent, and one of those guys that kind of came out of nowhere, Ty Cartier, who came up first round of the playoffs, started scoring goal after goal, and he was doing well, even doing well in that series against the Dallas Stars. And Karts, I think, is a guy that really grew up before our eyes in Coachella Valley, and we said, oh, he doesn't belong here. He belongs in the NHL, and we saw that. Another guy that Seattle got, Riker Evans, who was the Rookie of the Year for the Firebirds, could go up to Seattle. And Cartier, by the way, undrafted. How would you like to be Ron Francis and go, yeah, this guy wasn't drafted, but we like him anyway. We'll build him up. And that's something that I think could set Seattle apart for years to come. The development of these guys has been off the charts. When you have a coach like Dan Bylsma, by the way. Dan Bylsma's coming back for another season. Apparently, he's got some unfinished business. And Jess Campbell, who's the first full-time female assistant coach in professional hockey, she's done a terrific job just developing these prospects. So Seattle, watch out for them in the future a little bit. They've got some young talent that you got to keep your eye on. Cartier's one guy. Joey Decord, who was the stalwart for the Firebirds, could be the backup for the Kraken. So just a team to watch out for.
Definitely. We'll be doing that. So we had 4 teams from the Pacific make the playoffs last year, and a lot of people were down on the Pacific going into last season, saying it was the worst division in hockey. Did not turn out to be the case, as 3 of those 4 teams advanced into the next round. Of course, one of them had to lose because they were going head-to-head. That was unfortunately my Kings. But we also had the Stanley Cup winner come out of the Pacific. So the Pacific had a great year last year. Do you see them having another strong season this year as a division? Do you think 4 teams again? Could we even see 5 teams from the Pacific in the playoffs this year?
At least 4. At least 4. People are crapping on the Pacific Division like they always do. Partially East Coast bias. We know East Coast bias. Don't sleep on the Kings. Don't sleep on the Kraken. Those are 2 teams that could make deep runs. Seattle had a deep run. They almost won the second round. Keep in mind, they took Dallas to a Game 7 in that second round. They only lost by 1 goal. Seattle was within an eyelash of making the Western. Can you imagine if it was the conference finals between the Golden Knights and the Kraken? I think the whole hockey world would have imploded on the spot. But to see the improvements the Kings have made, to see how good Vegas is, to see the improvements Seattle has made, at least those three, and Edmonton is still going to be good. So at least those four teams. Could a fifth team sneak in there? Honestly, I don't know. I don't see it happening just because I don't see much improvement in Vancouver or Anaheim, and especially San Jose. Calgary could sneak in there possibly. Maybe Huberdeau can pull this team together, but if there's a fifth team that could make it, possibly, but I see four again. And I see those four teams making a lot of noise. And I know you've said this. Don't crap on our division. Do not do that. We're a good division, folks.
Certainly proved it last year. There's no doubt about that. All right, so bring it full circle to the Ducks. I think I know your answer on this, but I'm going to ask anyway. There's always a few surprises every year. Some teams that shock. Seattle did it this past season. Nobody predicted they were going to do what they did. Ducks have missed the playoffs 5 years in a row, haven't won a playoff series since 2016-17. Can the Ducks shock the world and make the playoffs this season?
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. This division is way too strong. I got to call it like it is. The Kings look very good this year. I have the Kings making the second round at least. Vegas is still good. Seattle's good. Edmonton's good. Calgary is still a very good team. I mean, for a while, we thought that Huberdeau-Tkachuk trade was going to not benefit either team, but we saw what Florida did. Calgary could be a team that could be on the rise. So I don't see the Ducks making it in the playoffs at all this season. The rest of the division is just way too strong. The Ducks are still way too young, and they need at least a couple of years to bring it all together, especially with a new coach and a new coaching staff, by the way. So it'll take them a couple of years. So I'm sorry, Ducks fans. I don't see it. The Kings fans watching, I have to give credit where credit is due. I have to.
We appreciate the honesty. That is Jason Hernandez. We appreciate his time. He is the host of Locked On Ducks. Check out the podcast and the YouTube channel covering the Anaheim Ducks all season long. Jason, I'm glad you're feeling better. I know you mentioned you had some health issues, so glad you're back, and hopefully things are going well as far as that goes. And I got to give Jason props. Okay, he's somewhere that's very hot right now, and because there was kind of a humming sound from his air conditioning. To make the show sound as good as possible, he turned off his air conditioning so he could do this interview. That is going the extra mile. Thank you, Jason. You can go turn your AC back on. Appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you at some point during the season, I'm sure. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Eddie.
All right. We appreciate Jason Hernandez and everything he did for the show today. For you everydayers, don't forget, coming up on Friday, we have our weekly fan feedback show. Your questions, your comments, anything going on with the LA Kings you want to talk about, you can email me, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. As always, you can leave your comments in the YouTube episode comment section as well. Also, stay interactive with the show by following us on Twitter and Instagram at LockedOnLAKings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks as always for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We'll talk to you tomorrow, and as always, go Kings go.